Well, you would say, only half joking, that it was the Pope who managed to reconcile Zelensky and Trump after the emotional and frankly scandalous meeting back in February at the White House. Today, President Zelensky met with US President Donald Trump in the Vatican, where both leaders had arrived for the funeral of Pope Francis. Please subscribe to this channel. It's easy for you, nice for me, and it really helps promote Ukrainian content here on YouTube. Thank you, guys. So, the teams of Presidents Zelensky and Trump had originally been working on arranging a follow up meeting after that so called pull aside format, but it didn't happen. Both sides said because of the tight schedules of both leaders. Well, at least they managed to have a conversation this time, and even better, there were no other parties, team members present, no Vance, no Vitkov. Both sides called the meeting good and constructive with potential for a historic result. And by the way, according to the Telegraph, at the farewell ceremony for Pope Francis, Zelensky was given a seat in the first row despite Vatican protocol. Normally, seating is done alphabetically in French based on whether a leader is a head of state or a government. So technically, Zelensky should have been somewhere in the third row or further back. Instead, he was placed in the front row, just 11 seats away from Trump. I believe they just filled up an empty place, a Vatican spokesman said to Telegraph. I imagine walking and be like, oh, look, President, here is a seat for you. Now, of course, we wouldn't ask why Donald Trump was the only person at the funeral not wearing a black suit and tie as the Vatican protocol strictly requires, but credit where it's due. Zelensky only needed 15 minutes to speak to Trump, so on the way back to the US, Trump posted another message on his social media and wrote that after new Russian attacks on civilian targets, he is increasingly skeptical about Putin's sincere intentions for peace. According to Trump, if Moscow really wanted to end the war, they would behave very differently. He even proposed increasing pressure on the Kremlin, including through banking and secondary sanctions, and added, too many people are dying. Well, Donald, how can I put this gently? I don't want to upset you, but yeah, it's very likely that Putin has been playing you for a fool. I know it's hard to imagine that Vladimir would lie, but he does. This is actually a very positive message for us because recent statements from Trump were far less encouraging. Until now, he kept saying he was tired of both sides, that dealing with Zelensky was difficult, and even threatened that if no ceasefire deal was reached soon, the US would walk away from negotiations altogether. Guys, before I continue, I want to thank all of you who send coffees on Buy Me Coffee and become patrons. Please do so if you want more videos on the channel. You can also help this channel by subscribing to it and like this video, because it will definitely help Ukrainian content to be seen by more people. And hopefully more people will hate Russia. I suggest you also subscribe to my X page, where I post regular updates about the situation in Ukraine, and to my Instagram, where I show the daily life in Ukraine. For example, according to the Times, Trump's plan includes allowing Russia to keep control over the occupied Ukrainian territories, and this condition is considered final. The Times cites a source close to Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff. Apparently, Trump believes President Zelensky has no real choice but to agree to the deal. Otherwise, Trump threatens to pull out of peace process. It's like, nice country you have there, shame if something happened to it. Bye. The US proposal presented by Vitkov to both Moscow and Kiev reportedly includes official American recognition of Russia's temporary control over Crimea and also de facto recognition of Russia's hold over parts of southern and eastern Ukraine seized after the 2022 full-scale invasion. Trump's view, according to the source, is basically the land was taken, it's not coming back. The current deal would freeze the situation on the ground, leaving occupied territories under Russian control. And if Ukraine refuses, Washington thinks the war could drag on for months or years, with Kiev depending heavily on European military and financial support. Translation: we are tired, please surrender faster so we can move on. How very leader of the free world of them. American officials also believe that public opinion in Europe could shift against large-scale spending on supporting Ukraine, especially with a potential recession looming in the EU, partially triggered by Trump's tariffs. After Vitkov's 3-hour talks with Putin in Moscow on Friday, Yuri Ushakov, Putin's aide on international affairs, who attended the meeting, proudly declared the negotiations constructive and useful. According to Ushakov, this conversation allowed Russia and the US to further align their positions not just on Ukraine but on the range of other international issues as well. Trump later, in an interview with Time magazine, stated that Crimea will remain with Russia and once again blamed Kiev for provoking Moscow's invasion. If only we Ukrainians had the foresight to avoid being invaded by simply not existing, right? Now, let's dive into the details of that infamous American peace plan. Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant would officially return to Ukraine, but management would be handed over to the United States, and the electricity it produced would be supplied to both Kiev-controlled and Russian-controlled occupied territories, including Crimea. And just a reminder, Ukraine would have to buy its own electricity. Yes, you heard that right. Russia gets a promise that Ukraine will never join NATO, although it may be allowed to join the EU. Sanctions against Russia would be lifted. The plan doesn't clarify if this includes EU sanctions too, and the US would start launching economic projects with Moscow. Next, Ukraine would supposedly receive reliable security guarantees provided by a contingent of European states, but with no US military involvement. Ukraine would get reconstruction aid, although the document doesn't specify where the money would come from, how much, or whether Russia would pay a single cent. So basically, trust us, bro, is the new official reconstruction plan. Meanwhile, Ukraine, along with its European partners, presented a very different plan, one that actually is serious about real peace and real security. So the ceasefire proposal includes a US-led and third-party monitored mechanism to ensure compliance. Russia must unconditionally return all deported and illegally transferred Ukrainian children, free all civilian hostages, and agree to a full all-for-all prisoner swap, which Ukraine has been proposing for months. The point about security guarantees has been expanded. Ukraine would receive reliable guarantees, specifically involving the US, structured similarly to Article 5 of NATO's charter. No restrictions on Ukraine's armed forces or on the presence of friendly foreign troops, arms, or operations within Ukraine. Territorial issues are to be discussed only after a full, unconditional ceasefire, starting with defining the line of control. Ukraine and Europe rejected any idea of giving the US control over the Zaporizhia nuclear plant. They don't rule out American participation in a multilateral management framework. Economically, the new plan demands full restoration and financial compensation for Ukraine, including using frozen Russian sovereign assets before any sanctions are lifted. Sanctions against Russia would only be lifted gradually and conditionally based on achieving lasting peace. They could be reimposed immediately if Russia violates the agreement. And now, for some fresh news from the swamps. The Russian Chief of General Staff, Valery Gerasimov, has officially admitted for the first time that North Korean troops are fighting in Ukraine. Previously, the Kremlin dismissed such reports as fake news. As always, Kremlin rule number one: deny everything until you accidentally confirm it yourself. In conclusion, it's ironic, but in the end, it looks like Pope Francis, even in death, managed to do more for Ukraine's diplomacy than months of so-called peace envoys by bringing all together all the key leaders in one place for direct important talks. Because we have Vitkov, who is spending weeks running back and forth to the Kremlin, kissing Putin's and Dmitryev's hands and whispering Kremlin fairy tales into Trump's ear. That's it for today. I want to thank all of you for supporting Ukraine and watching Ukrainian content. Please like this video, and if you really like it and you want more videos, you can support the channel's development on Patreon or buy me a coffee. The empire will fall. And Slava Ukraini!